My name is Claire Bennett, and at 28, I never imagined I'd become the center of a family feud worthy of a courtroom drama. When my beloved grandmother Margaret passed last month after a long illness, I assumed I'd quietly mourn her and honor her memory. But instead, I found myself at the heart of a battle I never asked to fight. It started with a textone that wasn't meant for me. My cousin Olivia accidentally messaged me instead of someone else. "Don't tell Claire about the will reading." My stomach dropped. Excluded. On purpose. Still, I showed up. "We already divided everything," my Aunt Brenda said smugly, arms folded. "You weren't invited for a reason." But then the lawyer looked up, confused, and said, "Her name is the only one in the will." The room fell silent. If you've ever felt like the black sheep, shut out by your own family simply for being different, you'll understand what that moment meant. Because this isn't just a story about inheritance, it's a story about loyalty, values, and the quiet power of doing the right thing. I was raised by parents who chose purpose over prestige. My dad, Thomas, Grandma Margaret's youngest son, was a high school teacher. My mom, Diane, a nurse. Every Sunday, we visited Grandma's historic Victorian home in Boston. It wasn't just a house, it was a home filled with laughter, stories, and the smell of fresh spice cookies. When I was 12, my world shifted. Dad died suddenly from an aneurysm. Mom took on double shifts to support us. And Grandma Margaret stepped in without hesitation. "Claire will live with me part of the week," she told the family. No one dared object. For 6 years, I split my time between my mom's tiny 2-bedroom apartment and Grandma's grand home. She became my second parent. We'd sit in her garden, sip tea, and she'd say, "You're like me, Claire, you see Pioplano price tags." While my Uncle Charles and Aunt Brenda lived in their gated homes, driving new Cadillacs and sipping aged bourbon, Grandma volunteered at soup kitchens and donated quietly. She never chased wealth, she lived with heart. So when I chose hospice care over high finance, they mocked me. Uncle Charles said I was wasting my life. Olivia once asked, dead serious, "But don't you want to be rich?" They never understood. But Grandma did. And in the end, her will proved it. Grandma once told me something that stuck in my bones. The real test of character is how you treat people when you think there's nothing to gain. And boy, was that test about to get real for our family. As her health began to decline, the visits from the others grew few and far between. Uncle Charles would breeze in once a month, spending more time running his hand along the baseboards and pointing out maintenance issues than talking to his own mother. Aunt Brenda? She'd arrive with overpriced candles or imported teas, set a timer on her phone, and leave exactly 60 minutes later. As for the cousins, unless there was turkey on the table or gifts under the tree, they were no-shows. But I kept coming. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. One cold December afternoon, Grandma handed me a small wooden box. Inside was a pearl necklace, a delicate, understated, and deeply personal. "It belonged to my mother," she said. "I want you to have it." It wasn't worth much by market standards, but I could feel its weight. Later, that simple necklace would be twisted into something ugly, used as evidence that I was manipulating her. But at the time, all I felt was honored. A week before she passed, I remember Grandma gripping my hand tightly. Her voice was low, but fierce. "Claire, I've been paying attention for years. And soon, I'm going to make things right." I thought she meant emotionally. Closure. Peace. I had no idea she was planning a final act that would turn the family upside down. 3 years earlier, the first crack in our already fragile foundation appeared. Uncle Charles summoned a family meeting not out of concern, but to pitch the sale of Grandma's lake house in New Hampshire. A place that had hosted generations of summer memories. I walked in to find a real estate agent sitting in Grandma's living room, holding glossy brochures. My blood ran cold. When I pushed back, Charles waved me off, said it was a practical decision. But Grandma, quiet until that moment, spoke up clearly, "I have no intention of selling that house." The agent packed up and left in awkward silence. That night, Charles cornered me. His words were sharp. "Don't forget who built this family's fortune," he growled. "And it sure wasn't your father." That was the night I realized this wasn't just family tension. It was war. And it had already begun. They're saying I'm manipulating her. Those were the whispers I began hearing passed quietly through family grapevines and echoed in cold glances at holiday dinners. "We need to protect Margaret from Claire's influence," Uncle Charles once muttered to Kevin when he thought I wasn't listening. "She's got her wrapped around her finger." It gutted me. I wasn't trying to gain anything, I was just showing up. But in a family that equated presence with intention, my loyalty was twisted into something sinister. I tried to clear the air. I wrote carefully worded emails to my aunts and uncles, explaining that I didn't care about Grandma's money, I just wanted her final months to be filled with peace, not suspicion. Most didn't respond. Aunt Brenda did, curtly. "We all want what's best for Mother." Apparently, that didn't include me. Easter rolled around, and I wasn't invited. I only found out about the gathering when Olivia posted a smiling family photo on Facebook. In the corner of one image, Grandma sat alone, hunched slightly, her expression dazed. That night, I called her. "Did you enjoy the celebration?" "It was fine," she said softly. "But they didn't make the deviled eggs the way I like, and Charles's house is always too cold." "I wish I could have been there," I said gently. There was a pause. "You weren't invited?" Her voice, full of honest confusion, told me everything. They'd kept her in the dark too. Then came the so-called visitation schedule. Brenda claimed it was to avoid tiring Grandma out, but I was suddenly limited to 2 hours on Sunday afternoons. Oddly, during nearly every visit, someone else, Olivia, Kevin, even Brenda, would conveniently show up too. The timing wasn't coincidence. It was control. So I adapted. On my days off, I'd bring lunch and sit with Grandma in her sunroom. Sometimes Rosa, her kind and observant health aide, would call me when Grandma had a particularly alert day. We found our moments, despite the obstacles. That final Christmas, I was left out entirely. Brenda texted, "We're keeping it small, Mother needs rest." But according to Rosa, small meant everyone except me. So I left a basket, Grandma's favorite spice cookies, a blue cashmere shawl, and a photo album I'd made from her lake house summers. I wanted her to feel remembered. She died in April. And once again, I wasn't told. Rosa, crying, called me herself. At the funeral, I was seated in the third row behind cousins who hadn't visited in years. I wasn't asked to speak. Charles gave a eulogy about business and legacy. But as I listened, I couldn't stop thinking. Grandma said she'd make things right. 2 weeks later, she did, starting with a text that wasn't meant for me. The next morning, I woke up with resolve pulsing in my chest. I called in and took a personal dia, rare move for someone like me. I chose my outfit carefully, a navy dress Grandma had always admired. Modest. Respectful. I wasn't walking into that law office as a gold digger, I was walking in as her granddaughter. As I drove through downtown Boston, my hands gripped the steering wheel a little too tightly. I kept rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd stay composed when they tried to shut me down. When I finally pulled into the parking garage, I sat in my car for 5 full minutes, staring at the dashboard. "You belong anywhere I wanted you to be," I could hear Grandma whisper. I held on to that. The law firm was perched on the top floor of a stately old brick building, the kind with arched windows and crown molding. When the elevator doors opened, the entire family was already there. Aunt Brenda was mid-sentence when she spotted me. Her face froze. "Claire?" she said, voice loud and tight. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here for Grandma's will reading," I replied, chin lifted. Uncle Charles stepped in front of me. "You weren't invited. This is for family." "I am family," I said calmly. Olivia scoffed. "Real family. The kind Grandma could actually trust." Just then, a distinguished older man stepped into the room. "Are we all here for the Margaret Bennett estate?" he asked, scanning the room. The air practically buzzed with tension. Brenda was quick with charm. "Mr. Whitaker, there's been a misunderstanding, Claire wasn't meant to be included today." He looked at his clipboard, then at me. "Miss Claire Bennett? Margaret's granddaughter?" "That's me," I nodded. "Then yes, you absolutely belong here." They weren't ready for that. We filed into a conference room with polished wood and soft lighting. I sat near the door. I could feel the weight of their stares pressing into my back. Whispers buzzed. She must have found out. Charles is going to lose it. Mr. Whittaker cleared his throat. Margaret was not just my client, but my friend. She was clear in her wishes. Then came the moment no one saw coming. He opened the will, glanced at the room, and said, "Claire Bennett is the sole beneficiary." The silence was deafening. And for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Mr. Whittaker's voice echoed through the conference room as he read the will aloud, his tone calm, but commanding. As the words sank in, the oxygen seemed to vanish from the room. "I hereby leave all my property real and personal, including my home at 47 Beacon Hill Avenue, Anu, the lake house at Lake Winnipegassi, financial accounts, investments, and all family heirlooms to my granddaughter, Claire Rose Bennett." A sharp gasp pierced the silence. Olivia's water glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the hardwood. No one moved to clean it. No one blinked. "That can't be legal," Uncle Charles barked, his face blotchy and red. But Mr. Whittaker didn't flinch. He continued smoothly, "Margaret left a letter explaining her decisions, which I'll give to Claire, but I'd like to emphasize this wasn't done in haste. She made this choice knowingly, with great care." At that, Aunt Brenda began to cry, mascara streaking her cheeks like ink on wet paper. "We took her to doctor appointments, made sure she kept her social ties," she choked. Kevin leaned forward. "We'll challenge this. She wasn't in her right mind." Mr. Whittaker straightened his back. "I strongly advise against that." Mrs. Bennett underwent thorough cognitive evaluations from 3 separate neurologists. All concluded she was fully competent. She even anticipated this reaction. As murmurs rippled through the room, I felt Grandma's words return to me, "I've been watching all of you for years." It wasn't a metaphor. She'd been documenting every interaction, every slight, every motive, disguised as care. Mr. Whittaker opened his briefcase again and handed me a sealed envelope. "Your grandmother asked that you read this in private, Claire. But given the circumstances, you may choose otherwise." With trembling hands, I unfolded her letter. "My dearest Claire, if you're reading this, I'm gone and chaos has likely begun. You're my only heir, because you're the only one who came without expectations. The only one who listened, who helped, who simply loved me. The rest came for status, for positioning, you never did. That's why I trust you with everything." I looked up, blinking through tears. The room was unraveling, Charles on the phone, Brenda protesting, Olivia in dramatic tears. Then Mr. Whittaker dropped the final hammer. Margaret kept logs. Visitor records, email archives, even audio recordings. And yes, security footage. She knew what was happening in that house. The silence that followed wasn't just shock, it was realization. They'd underestimated her and me. Mr. Whittaker didn't flinch. Margaret kept a full photo inventory of her possessions, dated, catalogued, and secured in multiple formats. Brenda let out a scoff, but her voice wavered. "That's absurd." "Is it?" he replied coolly. "Then perhaps you can explain why the Tiffany lamp from the study is now in your living room. Or why Olivia wore Margaret's diamond tennis bracelet to a charity gala last month. Or how 3 original paintings from the lake house ended up hanging in Charles's office, photographed, I might add, by a local design blog. Their faces drained of color. And as stated in her will, Whittaker continued, any items removed from Margaret's property must be returned within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in legal proceedings. That was Charles's breaking point. He shot to his feet, finger pointed and shaking. "This is your doing," he shouted at me. "You turned her against us, you manipulated an old, lonely woman." But I didn't flinch. I thought of Grandma's quiet laugh, her handwritten recipes, the way she squeezed my hand during late-night chats about hummingbirds and World War II. "No," I said calmly. She knew exactly what she was doing, she always did. The next few weeks were like living in a pressure cooker. The morning after the will reading, my phone started ringing before sunrise. First Aunt Brenda. Then Olivia. Then second cousins I hadn't seen in 20 years. Some begged, some threatened. Others demanded I do the right thing. One voicemail after another filled with guilt, rage, and entitlement. Brenda insisted Grandma wasn't well. Kevin tried bartering for silverware. Charles warned me his attorney would make quick work of this in court. Then came the social media smear campaign, passive-aggressive posts, dripping with sarcasm. Funny how people only show love when money's involved, Olivia wrote. Commenters chimed in, some defending her, others asking questions. I locked down my accounts and changed my number, but the stress settled in my body like wet concrete. I was exhausted, anxious, and beginning to unravel. When I accidentally forgot to chart a medication change at work, my hospice supervisor pulled me aside. Claire, this isn't like you. You need to take care of you now. She gave me a week off. I packed a bag and drove straight to Grandma's house, my house. But what I found wasn't comfort. It was emptiness. Stripped shelves. Missing heirlooms. The scent of her perfume still clinging to the air, but no warmth, no soul. They hadn't just taken things. They had stolen memories. It wasn't about furniture, jewelry, or antiques. What devastated me was the silence they left behind, the kind that seeps into your bones. Every missing trinket, every empty shelf wasn't just a theft of things, it was a theft of presence, of a woman whose legacy had been quietly erased while she was still warm in her grave. I wandered aimlessly into her bedroom, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows on the carpet. Something nudged me to check the back of her closet. Tucked behind a row of winter coats, I found a compact floor safe. My heart pounded as I tried birth dates, anniversaries, even her old rotary phone number. When I punched in her birthday, the 17th of March, it clicked open. Inside, a leather-bound journal, a handful of USB drives, and a small envelope labeled in her familiar script, for Claire. Use only if you must. I sat down on her bed, that same bed I used to nap on as a child, and opened the journal. It was meticulous. Dates. Conversations. Borrowed items never returned. Subtle betrayals that she had recorded not out of spite, but clarity. She hadn't been naive as she had been documenting. The flash drives were just as thorough, time-stamped photos, email backups, and audio clips. One entry stopped me cold. Charles came today. Asked about my health for 10 minutes, then spent the rest of the hour pressuring me to sell the lake house. He called me sentimental and irrational. What he doesn't know is I had it appraised. It's worth almost double what we paid. He's always confused cost with worth. Another one made my stomach turn. Brenda brought Olivia over. While she distracted me with that overpriced lavender candle, Olivia slipped upstairs. 20 minutes later, my tennis bracelet was gone. That night, I called Mr. Whitaker. I can't let them get away with this, I told him, voice trembling. He didn't hesitate. Your grandmother anticipated this. I'll connect you with someone who knows how to handle families like this. Enter Evelyn Pearson, estate litigation bulldog in a sharp navy blazer. Within hours of reviewing the evidence, she had cease and desist letters ready to go. This is one of the cleanest paper trails I've ever seen, she told me. Your grandmother didn't just leave you assets, she left you armor. But even armor doesn't stop every blow. Because when the legal papers hit their mailboxes, the real war began. And this time, they were playing dirty. That evening, I sat cross-legged on my living room floor with my laptop, heart pounding as I slid the first memory card into the drive. What appeared on screen stopped me cold. Grandma, sitting upright in her favorite floral armchair, speaking directly into the camera. Her voice was steady, her eyes laser-focused. The date stamp in the corner read, the 15th of September, almost 1 year before she passed. My name is Margaret Catherine Bennett, she began, and I am recording this of my own free will, fully aware and competent, as Mr. Whitaker can confirm. The camera tilted slightly, revealing Mr. Whitaker beside her, nodding firmly, stating the date for the record. What followed wasn't just a message. It was a detailed declaration of truth: names, dates, incidents, motivations. She had carefully catalogued the behavior of every relative. Her voice didn't tremble. Her reasoning was crystal clear. I watched each video with growing awe. It was like sitting across from her one last time, hearing her wisdom, her humor, and her fierce clarity. She didn't just leave me her estates, he left a strategy, a roadmap, a wall of protection. In her final recording, taken just weeks before her passing, her voice was softer, her frame thinner, but her spirit remained ironclad. Claire, she said gently, if you're watching this, then the storm has arrived. Remember what I told you, real kindness includes boundaries, and I didn't raise you to be passive. I raised you to stand your ground with strength and grace. For the first time in weeks, I felt steady. Strong. Seen. The next morning, I drove straight to Evelyn Pierce's office and handed over the flash drives. She watched the first video in silence, then leaned back in her chair with a slow, incredulous smile. This isn't a case, she said. It's a fortress. We launched our full offensive. First, we submitted a detailed inventory to probate court complete with photographs, timestamps, and legal affidavits from Rosa and hospice staff. Nurse Carter confirmed I had been there 64 times in Grandma's final year. Charles? 7. Brenda? 9. Financial records showed even more. Charles had borrowed over $50,000 with no formal repayment, while Brenda had used Grandma's credit card to pay for spa treatments, personal travel, and caregiving supplies from luxury retailers. Evelyn was methodical. Ruthless. Brilliant. We're calling a meeting, she said. And this time, you won't be walking in alone. That morning, I sat in her glass-walled conference room, watching the clock tick closer to the moment the truth would confront them all. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid. They arrived one by one, like actors entering the final act of a play they never thought would go off script. Uncle Charles entered first, flanked by his attorney, a jittery man in a too-tight suit who kept glancing at his watch like he had someplace better to be. Aunt Brenda followed, her eyes fixed on the floor, avoiding mine completely. Then came Olivia and Kevin, trying to put on a calm, polished front. But their eyes told a different story, tired, wary, exposed. Thank you all for coming, Evelyn began, her voice even, almost disarming. We've gathered today to address several unresolved matters regarding the estate of Margaret Bennett. Charles's lawyer wasted no time, launching into a carefully prepared argument filled with legal buzzwords, undue influence, mental capacity, inconsistencies. Evelyn let him finish. Then, without raising her voice, she picked up the remote. The screen lit up with a familiar face, Grandma, clear-eyed and confident. My name is Margaret Catherine Bennett, she said firmly, and this is being recorded on the 15th of September, of my own free will. The room froze. As the video played, I watched the reactions unfold in real time. Charles's complexion went from red to ghostly. Brenda covered her mouth. Olivia's mascara began to run as she silently cried. When the video ended, Evelyn folded her hands. There are 17 more, just like I teach, naming names, describing incidents, and clarifying her intentions. Then came the spreadsheet. Projected onto the wall was a catalog of everything taken without permission, from jewelry to artwork to rare books. The grand total? Just over $400,000. You have 7 days to return these items, Evelyn said matter-of-factly. After that, we move forward with criminal charges. Charles's lawyer leaned in and whispered something. Then Charles, uncharacteristically subdued, cleared his throat. Maybe we were emotional. This has been difficult for all of us. I met his gaze for the first time in weeks. Grief doesn't justify theft. By the end of the week, boxes began appearing on Grandma's porch. Movers dropped them off quietly. The jewelry arrived by courier, polished, packaged, and untouched by apology. But what came next surprised me. A call from Aunt Brenda. Her voice was softer, stripped of her usual edge. Claire, we didn't understand. We thought you were manipulating her. We never saw the bond you two had. No, I said gently. You never tried to see it. And for the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, the healing had begun. She painted that the summer before marrying your grandfather, Aunt Brenda had whispered. I always loved it, even if I never said so. Those small gestures, Olivia asking for the recipe book, Kevin choosing Grandpa's tackle box, Brenda remembering a watercolor, didn't undo years of tension, but they softened the edges. They reminded me that Grandma Margaret had touched each of us in ways we hadn't always acknowledged. She was more than an estate. More than a will. She was a person who gave without needing applause. A month later, the court finalized everything. I was confirmed as the sole heir, the legal owner of her homes, belongings, and accounts. On paper, the battle was over. But emotionally, I knew something had shifted. The damage, though buried beneath politeness, was still raw. I stood on the wraparound porch that evening, the same one I'd watched summer storms from as a little girl. Now it was mine. The wind rustled the wind chimes I'd hung just days earlier. As the sun sank behind the trees, I whispered to the air, "You saw us clearly, Grandma, even when we didn't see each other at all." 6 months passed. I had turned the house back into a home. The lavender bushes in the garden thrived again, bees circling lazily, just as they had during my childhood. I'd added soft touches, my own books in the study, a reading nook in the sunroom, cozy throw blankets Grandma would have picked out herself. What was once a battleground now felt like a place of rest. I had taken a leave from the hospice center to manage the estate, but also to breathe. The inheritance brought financial freedom, but more than that, it brought purpose. One rainy afternoon while sorting paperwork, I found a final envelope tucked into the back of a drawer. It simply read, "To Claire when the dust settles." It was another letter, written in Grandma's elegant, looping hand. She told me the inheritance was never meant as revenge, no matter what others believed. It was a vote of confidence. A belief that I would use what she left not just to build wealth but to build meaning. She reminded me that money reveals character but doesn't define it. That it can be a tool for healing, not division. And she urged me not to let bitterness calcify, but to leave space for grace and even reconciliation if and when I was ready. So I started small. I funded a scholarship in her name for students entering hospice and palliative care, just like I had. And I finally began becoming the version of myself she always believed I could be. In the months that followed, I focused on turning grief into purpose. With Evelyn Pierce's help, I finalized the paperwork to launch the Margaret Bennett Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting elderly individuals who, unlike Grandma, didn't have someone to advocate for them in their final years. I'd seen too many people at the hospice center die alone, forgotten by their families. This was a way to carry forward Grandma's quiet compassion project, one life at a time. I also kept a promise to both her and myself. I booked a flight to Italy and visited the little village in Tuscany where Grandma's parents were born. I walked the cobblestone streets, stood in front of the modest stone church where they had been baptized, and sat on a bench overlooking the rolling vineyards she used to describe with so much longing. In that moment, thousands of miles from Boston, I felt closer to her than ever. The inheritance had given me more than financial freedom, it had given me the gift of connection, across time and generations. Back home, the family dynamics slowly, cautiously, began to shift. Olivia was the first to reach out. She invited me for coffee, nervously showing me pictures of her newborn daughter Margaret. "She deserves to know the real stories," Olivia said, her voice unsteady. "Not just the versions we dress up for fundraisers. Would you be willing to share some of your memories with her someday?" I nodded. Kevin invited me to his wedding a few months later. I had a feeling his fiancée had urged him to do it, but when I arrived, he introduced me as my cousin Claire, the one running Grandma Margaret's foundation. It wasn't warm, but it was a start. Aunt Brenda remained distant. Still, a Christmas card arrived in the mail. Inside was a single sentence, "Your grandmother would be proud of what you've built." Coming from her, it felt like a bridge. Uncle Charles never came around. I didn't expect him to. Some hearts don't bend, they just harden with time. But I left the door open, quietly, in case he ever wanted to find his way back. The most unexpected healing came during a foundation event, when I met Daniel, Grandma's nephew and my father's cousin. He had moved to California decades ago and hadn't spoken to the family in years. Over dinner, he shared stories about my dad I had never heard. "Thomas was the best of us," he told me. "He chose people over prestige. Just like Margaret." Through Daniel, I discovered second and third cousins I never knew existed, people untouched by the inheritance drama. They sent me faded photographs, handwritten recipes, and notes that broadened my understanding of who we were before the money, before the bitterness. Exactly 1 year after Grandma's passing, I hosted a memorial dinner in her honor. Only those who had truly loved her were invited: Rosa, the hospice staff, Mr. Whitaker, a few longtime neighbors, Daniel and his family. Olivia came too, with baby Margaret on her hip. We shared stories over roast chicken and red wine, laughed about Grandma's stubborn streak, cried when we read her favorite psalm. It was the kind of night she would have adored, simple, heartfelt, genuine. Later, as guests mingled in the garden, Mr. Whitaker found me near the porch. "You know," he said, holding a glass of Grandma's favorite cherry cordial, "I've overseen hundreds of estates. I've seen money destroy families for far less than what was at stake here." I sighed. "I don't think we fared much better." He shook his head. "No, you misunderstand. The miracle wasn't that you kept the house, it's that you kept yourself." I stood quietly, taking in his words. The real inheritance wasn't the house, or the money, or even the foundation. It was the courage to stand up when it would have been easier to step back. It was the choice to carry Grandma's values forward, not just her possessions. That night, as fireflies blinked along the hedges and the last guests trickled out, I lingered on the porch. A warm breeze carried the scent of lavender, just like it had in the summers of my childhood. "We did it, Grandma," I whispered to the night. "You can rest now." Have you ever had to fight for what was right, especially when it meant standing up to your own family? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. If this journey moved you, please subscribe for more real-life reflections on family, legacy, and what it means to honor the people who shape us. Because in the end, the most lasting inheritance isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in courage, compassion, and truth. This story reminds us that the most valuable inheritance we can ever receive is not wealth but wisdom, integrity, and the strength to stand alone when it matters most. Claire's journey through betrayal, exclusion, and family manipulation is one many middle-aged adults may recognize in their own lives. It's a powerful lesson in setting boundaries, honoring the truth, and staying grounded in one's values 7 when the world around you questions them. Margaret's legacy wasn't just a house or bank account, it was a clear vote of confidence in character over convenience. In a society often obsessed with appearances and status, this story speaks to the quiet power of compassion, loyalty, and doing the right thing when no one's watching. For anyone navigating complex family dynamics or facing unjust judgment, Claire's resilience offers a deeply resonant reminder: your worth isn't defined by others' opinions, it's proven by your actions. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is leaving behind a path of protection, so those who come after can walk it with strength and clarity. Let this story remind you it's never too late to choose truth over comfort, and dignity over approval.